Hey.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Committed and Covered, All Things Marriage and Family Talks. Glad you guys joined us today. I'm Nicole Taylor, and this is my wonderful husband.
Malcolm Taylor.
And today we have with us our co-host, Doctors Trevor and Edith Frazier.
Awesome.
And you guys know that they're no strangers to this platform. Therapists, counselors, educators, professionals.
Preachers.
Yes, preachers.
The whole nine. Professors.
Yes. And so today our topic is on roles and expectations in a marriage. So we're going to dive right into this conversation. And you want to go ahead and get us started, babe?
Did you say roles and expectations?
Roles and expectations.
You guys
marriage.
already know I'm Mr. Right, right?
He thinks he is.
And because of that, no. But yes, roles and expectations, I think that is a really tough one because I'll tell you this, when I first got married, I had an idea of roles and expectations and it didn't vibe with my wife's roles and expectations, but we have some experts.
That's right.
Who are still working on roles and expectations.
But we have some experts that we respect that are going to help us out and share what this thing looks like. Because sometimes when you hear roles and expectations, it's only what we think.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
it's only what we think, but it really is a group effort.
So to get us started, do we bring expectations into the marriage?
Oh, I think everyone does.
Yeah.
And they're based on a number of things.
Yeah, you think, well, oftentimes is what you have seen in your own family.
Yes.
You have what your parents did, and you think that's the way it should be. In my case and in my wife's case, my mother used to pay all the bills.
Wow.
And my father used to pay all the bills.
Wow.
So my expectation when we got married was that she was going to pay the bills.
And my expectation when we got married was that he was going to pay all the bills.
That was a problem starting out.
Yeah.
It was a problem.
And we sort of went back and forth trying
to find the best person for the job.
Yes.
And I was fired.
Oh.
And she wanted to be fired. 'Cause
Amen. Amen.
Wow. I love that because, I had an expectation too, like growing up, my mother, dad, their parents, GI generation, whatever my dad said kind of went, but it wasn't like it was like we felt like this, like she's serving him, but we just thought that's how it went, So I'm like, hey, when I marry my wife, when I say, hey, let's do this, she'll be like, yeah. But I married a woman who was first in line in terms of sibling order, and she had a way that seemed right, not to me, but to her. So I had to learn that too. So we didn't have the bill issue, but we definitely had who's, I don't want to say who's boss, but what would you say, babe?
I wouldn't say who's boss. Just like you gave the example of what you grew up, what you
Yes.
saw. And for me, coming from a single parent home, the oldest, my mother was very strong-willed. And so for me, I had an opinion, and I wanted that opinion to be heard and
yeah, you did.
validated. So that's where we butted heads.
Well, so that's one piece. We've said, so part of what you bring with your expectations is what you've seen.
Right.
But as you have stated, if you don't see a couple, then you have expectations based maybe on, maybe what you've read about,
what you saw on TV.
what you saw on TV, or what you think. You don't know what to expect. So, a disproportionate number of the couples that are getting married now, they don't have the two-parent home.
That's
so
true.
then they just come into the relationship with kind of expectations that, it's so funny to me when we do premarital, they're so in love, they just think everything's going to be wonderful, And so when you say that, there will be conflict, they just kind of look at you and think, they just don't know.
Not with us.
No, because we love each other.
And we generally, it's interesting, we flip between a conflict and an intimacy discussion for our premaritals. And sometimes we say, what is it that you all think that you're dealing with?
Right.
And sometimes one will say intimacy is our problem. The other will say, I think we have conflict and communication issues. And both are netted within the communication idea. And so they get really, well, let's try. Which one should we start out with? And that last time we did that, which was last week, last Thursday, we said, intimacy. And when they started in, we said, no. Conflict.
Wow.
Conflict is what we need to talk about.
But what you said, okay, I grew up in a single parent home, partially. My mother was married to my sister's father. but that wasn't a good example, and I will admit that. So I knew what I did not want and what was not good, but I also did know too that as the oldest and coming from a family of majority women, that I wanted my opinions to and my feelings to be heard and validated.
It was a
as
little
well.
more than the majority women. I think it's like 99.9% women. I think the men were there, for just procreation, but it was. I'm not kidding. It's like it was all women, and I think for me, my household was male dominated, and strongly male dominated.
that's
I mean,
right.
we got our way.
Yeah.
And my mother, made the bed up, washed the clothes, and I wasn't looking at this like this is like my mother is our servant. I just looked at it like my mother. That's what mothers.
That's what women do.
Yeah, like that's yeah.
That was the obvious. She's supposed to do that.
Yeah, to the point, it was really bad. To the point when we first got married, like Nicole, if I'm sleeping and somebody called me or something, she would, Malcolm. And I'm like, you scared me. I said, my mother would wake me up like this.
Yes.
Like she would rub me and say, Malcolm. Like it was funny. My wife was like, you didn't marry your mother.
That's right. Yeah, I was thinking of something like, I'm not your mother.
Yes,
she-
I would say
I'm
that
not
often.
your
Yeah.
mother.
And she tried to help me out and be nice. And one time she woke me up and she was gritting her teeth like this. No. You're like, ooh.
She didn't want to do it.
No, she did not. She did not. So you guys, I'm quite sure you can share some of your experiences or even your questions. So as we go through this is interactive. So we want you guys to throw your comments and your questions in the chat. And we thank you for the shout outs that you've already given us. But guys, this is some real conversation. So if you've got something to share or say or ask, because we've got some gurus up here with us today, please join in with us.
I see this question, should expectations in marriage be a part of the marriage preparation process? And we were talking about that.
Yeah.
And we realized it should be, but we don't often do, we in our premarital, which is, this is really good to make us think about it. We deal a lot with core values.
Yeah.
What are your core values and which actually core values tell you a little bit about expectations. So what things do you value? But things are important.
Yeah. And that's what we concluded, well, okay, expectation is a good thing to be thinking about because people do go into the marriage with expectations.
Right.
Expectations that they have formed out of their background, but then now you look at it, is that what you really want? Yeah. And then what we say with the core values say, well, these are some of the things I know that happened in my family and his family or her family, and now what do we do with that?
What do we want? What core values do we want in our family?
Yes.
So we encourage couples to first develop core values for this new family,
Right.
and then to develop a mission statement.
Wow, that's deep. That's good.
And then something too that came to mind. I can speak for myself. I have had expectations in my head, but I really did not relay them to him until the issue came. And then I was like, well, hey, I thought you know.
Would do X, Y, Z.
She was operating on telepathy, and I'm like, I'm not Spock. I can't. I don't know. She's like, you didn't get that memo. I'm like, nah, I didn't. And you're right, Kanique. I did not marry my mother. That was a blow, Kanique, but I'll take it. So yeah.
Yeah, but expectations, and we can bring in unrealistic expectations.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And expectations are formed even as we get into the marriage later on. We start thinking, well, she has the babies and she's going to take care of them. And how do I get into this thing? And then she may have the expectation, well, I thought he was going to help me because these are his children too.
Right. Yeah.
And it really goes on where we have to then begin to understand that as we mature in a relationship and as we think of sharing in the relationship, those expectations are going to change.
Yes.
Both of us are going to have changed expectations.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, if the marriage is going to work.
Yeah.
Kimberly says, should core values be discussed during dating prior to marriage?
We would say so.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I don't think people often recognize what the core values are. So most of us were raised in core values. What were the things that your parents really emphasized? What did they think was important? And so I remember the first time I started thinking about it. So for spirituality was very important in my family, but also autonomy.
Yeah.
Like, making your own decisions, being an autonomous person.
Yes.
Working hard was important in my family, education. So these
was.
were the core values that I was raised with. And even though Trevor's family is Caribbean, we always say, core values transcend culture.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why That's why we think they're so important.
And
That's
so
pretty
we
deep.
were thinking about core values as something that really a family has captured in the way they think about some of those things they don't even think
Yeah.
because we know of our family being hard workers. So, and the assumption was that everybody's going to be a hard worker in this family. And I saw a family today where I watched the kids and I had to tell the parents, compliment her, your kids really work hard.
Wow.
And they don't just stand back as some people sit, and others around the auditorium were just sitting around. These kids were buzzing around, and I said, wow.
Yeah, they were expected to work.
Yeah, they were expected to work, and they didn't think anything special about that.
Yeah, and we've laughed about it. Just as an aside, sort of a shout out to my deceased father. When we would have people in our circle who wouldn't work, my father said, "They're not worth two dead flies."
Oh, that's pretty bad. That's a good one.
Because he believed
And hard
that
work.
everybody around him is going to work.
Work hard.
He didn't want anybody staying home sleeping in bed when he was out working.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
So that was an important. And the same thing with my father. He used to get us up on Sunday morning. Y'all going out to work with me.
Wow.
I had three of us as brothers, and we knew that we had to work. So that was one of those core values that was endemic within the.
Yeah.
And
the
also,
family.
you see how they're almost connected to expectations too, if you think about it. Because if you value education, then your expectation is that your children will be educated.
Right.
Your expectation is your spouse will be
Yeah.
concerned with education, and so they're very much next door neighbors, I would say.
We wondered about our kids how they imbibe those expectations.
Yes.
And we never said anything to them about you're going to be a physician, you're going to be a dentist. No, that wasn't even said.
Yeah.
But there was like that. We have to go to college. This is all we
Okay.
did, and we didn't have to say that. They saw it. They were engaged. They saw all around them. So it was a natural thing for
Wow.
them to do. Those were expectations that came out of, I don't know, where did that come from in terms
Yeah,
of
I think it's
an
just, again, a
experience?
core value.
Yeah, it's
model behavior.
Yeah, model.
Model behavior.
Has nothing to do with what you say necessarily.
Well, I had to ruminate on what was said earlier by you, Dr. Frazier, the wife, that core values transcend culture.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's pretty deep because, if we process that, we come in with we've been enculturated from our home. But if we have core values as a foundation, I guess if we set those, in the dating phase, premarital phase, because I was thinking about my next question to you guys was and is, how do you get past the stalemate of our expectations being like one-sided, because it always seems that way. But I did hear about core values over culture. So I'm kind of putting those two together.
Yeah. But it's out there from the family that you come from. And like I said, it's not always stated.
Yeah.
But it is assumed that you're going to do certain things in your life experience.
That's true.
So they're going to look at. I mean, I guess they didn't even realize. We didn't realize some things. That it was caught. We talk about that. Some things are, you state and you build around, but some things are caught in the experience.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's kind of responding again to your question, how do we get beyond sort of, these expectations? Well, we go back to our personal experience. You have to discuss it
Yes.
and then see what's realistic. And so we went, and one of the things I'd like for couples to know, I don't know why people think one discussion will resolve.
That is true.
And it can be
We talked
ongoing.
about it.
Exactly.
And,
Yeah.
we talked about something for 30 years before we resolved
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
yes.
you have to keep talking about it. And we're using the one where we came in with these expectations that Trevor would pay the bills, I would pay the bills. So we tried a number of things. We tried doing it together. that didn't work because my husband's he's an owl. He likes to start things at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't do that. I can't do nothing at 10 o'clock at night. I'm like,
Yeah.
and then, so that didn't work. And then my husband is a detail person. So he would get stuck on something like, there's 2 cents missing. I'm like, who cares? I'll give you 2 cents. He's like, no, we have to balance it.
I love
we
it.
do?
I love
No, I'm not balancing it. So that's, yeah. Oh, I have all of the negative from you.
Yeah. Nicole and I are always we G about it.
So you see, so we had to keep talking about it, and eventually we recognized who had the strengths,
Yeah.
who was better at, especially when I did it solo. And
Yeah.
There
There was a
little-
question.
there was a
of
Yeah,
little
it.
you had several
Well,
questions.
and
Yeah,
they're
Kimberly's
basically
given
you're
us some.
responding to some of the
Some of
questions
it,
that have
yes.
been
Yes.
asked. Kimberly says, "What do you do when core values collide?
Yeah, I thought
Stay
it was a
at
good
home
question.
versus both parents." But you basically answered that by saying you have to
talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
And then
Christopher and
Rochelle.
Rochelle
But I'd
had
like to
one.
follow up on that. Not only do you have to talk about it, but you have to look at it in the totality. Perhaps when you have young children, you might end up being a stay-at-home mom. It just might be worth it for your family. But when they're older, maybe that might be a time. I mean, we economically could not have a stay-at-home mother for long term. That didn't work for our finances. And I'll just tell
You guys
another-
were in missionary work.
yeah, we were doing missionary work, exactly. And so I tell people, I remember one day when my daughter was 2 or 3, and I was a stay-at-home mother. And she needed shoes, but she needed to go to the doctor. And I was there like, what should I do? That shouldn't be, that's not a decision I want to make.
Yeah.
So then it
Wow.
became, then I'll have to go.
I have to go
And
to
you
work.
know, I was raised too. My mother always told me, as a woman, you work. You need to work. And so when I decided to resign from a position I had been in for years, that was the hardest thing for me to leave, to do that and not work for a while. But I knew my husband, he was cheering me. He was like, hey, I'm good. But it was me battling me about, my mom said, as a woman, you work. You have that independence, So the expectation was there, I just reflected back on how I was raised about working.
I think that's another piece with expectations, going back to what we were saying before. Sometimes it's not so much that we see our parents model, but our parents say things.
Yes.
And we get those messages, and they said, this is what men do, or this is what women do. You shouldn't do this or that or the other. And so you think, okay, my mother loves me. She must be right, and I'll listen to her.
Yeah.
But sometimes, mother or father don't know what's best.
But getting back to that issue of colliding issues and expectations or even core values, how do you navigate that? How do you get around the fact that there's sometimes a collision because you're stuck that your spouse should do certain things, but yet they can't move past that. The other person can't. So what do you do with those collisions? How do you work it out?
That's
One
what Kim
thing
just
for
asked.
sure.
I think somebody put that up there.
Well, one thing for sure, prayer.
Yeah.
I can recall Malcolm was adamant about me wanting to sell a truck once before. And I loved that truck and I did not want to sell it. But he was like, we're going to sell it. And I was like, no, we're not. And so we bumped heads. But the Holy Spirit said, go and pray. We prayed. We prayed separately. The next day, I was like, you know what? You want to sell the truck? Sell the truck. He was like, you know what? You want to keep it? Keep it.
Look at God.
Then you were colliding over there.
Colliding over
Look
there,
at God.
right?
Look
But
at God.
prayer, and sometimes,
Yeah, absolutely.
sometimes it may feel like you're not winning the battle, and it's not about winning.
That's the big
It's not
thing.
about winning, but sometimes, the decision has to be made. You know what? I'm going to fall back on this one. Is this a major one that I really have to battle?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Rochelle asked the question, there it is. Should roles or expectations be based on strengths? Who's better with finances or with the cooking or cooking? I like that.
That sounds like Rochelle.
Dr. Edith, can you
Thank you
please
so much,
advise?
Rochelle.
Can you please advise? I guess she's tired of cooking.
Yeah. Well, I think there's some truth that the person who's best at whatever should do.
Something,
But I also think that in a marriage you negotiate.
Yeah, because we
Yes,
compliment.
yes,
Sometimes
yes.
she cooks and I'm cleaning. I'm picking
Yeah.
up, I'm washing the dishes.
Yeah.
Sometimes I say, oh, she always expects me to wash these dishes.
I really, really do. Yeah. Well, if I cook, I really do. Yeah, thank you.
She walks away and says, oh, yeah, okay, that's done.
But I will say that that's now that the two of us are alone. Before we had two maids in the household.
That's
Oh,
right.
yeah.
Wash the
Kids,
dishes.
kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, but now
Bought
that
and paid
it's been
for.
a long time since they've been with us, so then we've had to wash the dishes ourselves.
Yeah.
And we go back and forth. If he's really busy doing something and I cooked, then I'll clean up. But if he's available,
No, she likes that.
I do. I don't
Yeah.
like
So
cleaning.
she doesn't like to clean
I
up.
don't like to clean
it's
up. You got it.
But I know also too, when we had our kids, there were things before kids I did. I cooked, cleaned, did all those things. And then when kids come into the picture and you're working and activities, you tend to get more busy with things.
That's right.
And I went to Malcolm and I said, hey, we have 2 small kids now. This is where I need some help. If I'm home cooking, I need you to prepare the baths. Or if I prepare the bath, you start something. And so we just have to, come together and talk about it. And typically we would sit down and have a conversation like this. We both were in school at one time, both working. So let's look at our schedules. Let's see who can do this, who can do that. And it wasn't perfect, but trying to have a plan helped things to go more smoother than if we didn't have a plan. Yeah. And so the expectation was there that, both of us, we got to do this together to
Right.
make it work in the house.
Somebody said choose your battles, and that's important.
That's
That's
true.
right.
What is it that we're going? Do I want my wife to spend some time with me, or at the end of the cooking and cleaning, she's tired and she's not wanting to spend any time? So I
Yes.
think
You mean
there is-
spend time?
well, yeah.
Yeah.
I want to spend some
You took
time.
my words. I said the same thing. I said I realized that too. When I helped her, she helped me. So I said I can help. Yeah, I
It goes
can.
back to speaking the love language,
Yeah.
your spouse's love language.
And I think what we're really saying is couples need to talk, and they need to compromise. They're not competitors. And in the Cradle division, they have this memory verse that my grandson used to really like, and it's like working together as a team.
Oh wow.
Yes.
And that's what we're supposed to do. Work together as a team.
And Kimberly
And so-
is saying that.
Yeah.
Yes, you cook. You should.
You should clean up.
You
You
shouldn't
have
Shouldn't have to
to
clean up.
you shouldn't have
That's
to
right,
clean up.
Kim. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And every couple does have a system that works for them. People come to our house and they'll say, "Well, can I help?"
Yeah.
But when we entertain, we actually, if you think about
Y'all
it,
do.
we have a system. Trevor's there doing his things. I'm doing my things.
Yeah.
And then we work together as a team.
In reality, sisters, I like that. She said something that's pretty good. Don't compare your system to someone else's.
Every system, you need your own system.
That's right.
What
Everybody's
works for you.
different. Right.
Yeah, I love
What
it.
works for you might not work for us.
That's
so
right.
we have to do what
That's
works
right.
for us.
That's right.
Yeah.
So let's kind of talk about some unrealistic expectations that sometimes couples bring into the marriage.
Okay.
So I have one where sometimes spouses expect your spouse to become who you want them to be. And this is something typically you find earlier in the marriage when you're newlyweds, wanting your spouse to be who you want them to be.
Well, this is what I say that fits with that. We marry someone who has X, Y, Z characteristics, nothing like us.
Right.
And then we spend the rest of the marriage trying to make them like us. Which, if they were like us, we wouldn't have married them.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's
Those
because
were
they're
the
not
compliments.
like us that we married them.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing you have to realize is in a marriage, you all, okay, the Bible says the two become one and they become one flesh.
Yeah.
And the one fleshness that the Bible is talking about is the fact that we're complementary.
Yeah, it's complementary. There's no way that you can get around that. It's like it's fitting into, and it really moves from even the sexual to the spiritual to the emotional. Who does and who needs to complement and who needs to come together? We both do. We need to match in a way the other person.
That's a good
and
word.
we help each other. And when that happens, then you see a marriage that's in sync. People think, oh, you're all always like that? No, we
just
worked
right.
it out. You know, we became that match. We
Yes.
became that couple because we saw the value in being helpful to each other.
Yeah, so where I'm strong, often that's an area where Trevor may be weaker.
Okay.
And then where I'm weak, Trevor's strong. And so why would I want to change an area that's his strength, and make him, I've already alluded to the fact that, I'm a little, well, I didn't say this, but I'll say it for them now. I'm a little messy, and he's really neat and organized. That works for me. you
Yeah.
know? I make jokes that if I'm sick and I want to stay in bed all day long, I'm afraid to get out of the bed and go to the bathroom because I'll come back and the bed will be made.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's pretty
Because
deep.
he has to have the bed made. And if I'm sick now, he's doing a little better. He'll just make his half of it.
Just make a half of now. I don't
Okay,
because she's gonna
See,
come back and fuss
that's
"You
what
made
he
up my
brings.
bed."
I'm not.
Well, does he pull the cover so hard that it makes you? I should have just gotten up because he just
No, he
woke me
doesn't
up.
quite do that. He's not quite there.
No, I've learned that it's just better to make up my side well.
Okay.
And that gives the impression that we're supposed to be making this
Okay.
better. My mother wouldn't expect the bed to be unmade
See,
through the day.
expectations
Yes.
you bring from your home.
Yeah.
His mother's very orderly.
Yes.
The other thing his mother was, she didn't believe in leaving a dish in the sink.
No,
Wow.
she didn't.
That really bothered
No.
him.
Yeah.
It had no impact on me.
None at all.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, Edith would cover it up.
Okay.
She'd put a cloth
Put a
over
cloth
the
over
dishes.
and you won't see them. If it bothers you to see the dishes in the sink.
You see a cloth, not dishes. That's pretty good.
But then my family did do that also.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wait, but that's amazing because definitely we are different, and obviously that difference is what attracted
Absolutely.
us to
Opposites
each other.
attract.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. Why do we try to do that? Change each other. I don't. It's like an oxymoron. You meet someone, you fall in love with them, but then after a while, it's like you want to change them.
Everything they do.
Well, I think it's because we believe that if that person met our expectations or were like us,
Yeah.
then we would be happy. Yeah, and I
You
think
would be marrying yourself.
that's wrong. Exactly,
You'd
just
be
marry
marrying
yourself.
yourself.
Yes. Yeah,
Yes.
there was this. I was in a restaurant one time, and they were playing a country song, and I thought it was so funny because the words said this. The guy is singing, and he said, "I'm living up to your low expectations because your low expectations are high enough for me." I was like, that is real good. I need to write that down. And there's some people, wherever I'll meet you right underneath what you expect,
Yeah.
And I think, that really can,
Yes.
yes. But I just thought that was funny.
Kirk is getting a lot of responses in there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's
Yeah,
Kanique.
yeah. That's mighty.
Mighty Nugent. He's mighty.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, what about another one? I have here on my card, trying to fulfill the expectations of your parents or extended family. We basically kind of touched on this somewhat, and it makes me think of when our kids were younger too. Malcolm used to always want me to do the devotion with them.
Yes.
And so one day I was like, why? And he said, oh, because my mom. He said, my mom, she woke us up and we had devotion, and at night we had devotion. So I was like, okay.
And here's the other side to that. When we would pray collectively, I always wanted her to pray first because my dad closed us out.
And he wanted
Yeah.
it to be just like
And she always felt
that.
like I should pray first, and she at the end because men should go first or something like. So it really there was a clash. I'm like, you do worship with the kids, and then I'll pray last. It's like
So we have this workshop that we do. It's called "Who's Sleeping in Your Bed,"
we need that workshop.
and it has to do with the fact that when you get married, you know, I saw a picture many years ago, and there was a couple in bed, and there were two other people on both sides of them. It was his mother and his father, and her mother and her father. And the point we're making,
That's
not
really
so much
good.
that they're in bed with you literally,
Yes.
but they come, what they value, the way they did, what the messages that they gave us. And so we really, as adults, have to really deconstruct those messages and determine which messages are valid
Yes,
and
true.
that we need to keep for our marriage. And so that shouldn't be a determinant because, you know, I can't remember what it was, something my husband said early in our marriage when I said, well, this is not, you know, we're not a Caribbean family. You know, this is not your family, this is a new family. That we're not Caribbean, we're not Southern, we're kind of mixing the two together.
Like our kids call it Jamarians.
Yeah, Jabarians, yeah.
Yeah, so we eat greens and rice and beans.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
you go,
I like
there you
that.
go.
I like
But what's
that.
amazing, after 25 years, him and his sister, they will say, "You act just like mom, his mom."
Yeah.
And I laugh
I don't know,
because
yeah.
there are some things that I've started doing just like her, you know.
Yeah.
So been married for a while, so
Yeah,
I've adapted some of those things, but good things. Those are very good things that I do. So yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
But you know, the thing about worship, really, we accentuate the fact that the male is the priest of the family.
True.
And so worship then was our engagement, my engagement in particular. But with the kids, we flipped that all the time. We used to do it, you know, and I would do it and she would do it. But ultimately, I was the one that called worship and make sure worship was. And I still instilled that in our premarital time. We talk to the men. Sometimes they're not comfortable doing that, and we're wanting you to know that's a responsibility that God has given you.
And it doesn't matter if they're Christians or not. I mean, I remember we married a couple.
Yeah.
We didn't marry them, but we did their premarital.
Premarital.
He was a Christian, but she
She
was from
was-
Japan. I'm
yeah.
not sure if she had any religious.
Yeah.
So, and so we just said, you know, this is what we believe.
Yeah.
That there should be a spiritual foundation, and we think that the husband, you know, so we give the same spiritual
Yeah.
concepts regardless of.
And this was the expectation that we engendered to them, and it came back, you know, that, and many of the couples, we say that to all, and so it does become a part that they will then consider that as one of the expectations that we have in a relationship.
Well, here's my question. It's not on the card, but when do we get to the point that it's non-negotiable when we talk about expectations?
Well, I would say anything outside of Christ.
Yeah, I think moral issues are not
Okay.
negotiable.
Yeah.
So I told my students this week. I think if your spouse wants to do something, let's say they want to do a menage a trois,
Okay. Wow. Scary.
that's not negotiable.
Yes.
That's right.
That's a moral issue. You know,
And we talk about several of those.
there are all kind of things
within
that
the,
people may
relationship.
want to do that,
Yeah.
as you said, are outside of God's will,
Right.
but they're also immoral.
Yes.
And so when you get to immorality, then there's no compromise with immorality. You know, so if you expect that, if that's a deal breaker, then we have a little problem.
And people do need to talk about this in the marriage.
Absolutely.
And it needs to be, because there are some tensions, and we know that in our counseling, there is a tense experience about what these expectations are when it comes to the bedroom.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I mean, even something like the whole idea of domestic violence. It's okay to hit people. And notice I didn't say spouse.
Yes.
I didn't say wife. I said people, your spouse.
That's true.
Because either one can hit. It's it's inappropriate.
Yes.
Correct.
And that is a non-negotiable.
That's a non-negotiable.
And you know, that's amazing because it's been years, and it's hard to hear that in a church setting that, you know, domestic violence is a non-negotiable.
Yeah, it's a non-negotiable.
It is.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and there are people who feel like because you're the head of the house, or because if he hadn't said that or done that, then I wouldn't have hit him. No, it's a non-negotiable.
Yeah.
So if you say that's unacceptable, that if you expect that if I do things that you don't like, you can hit me, that's an expectation that is unrealistic in
Yes.
a Christian marriage.
We had an experience this week with cursing.
Yeah.
You know, that's one of our non-negotiable
Yeah.
things.
Right. Ours
It's
too.
immoral, you know, to curse at each other, and
Yeah.
and it can. For this person, it was really shocking because they had not experienced that.
So one of the things we have couples do, I hadn't thought about, but I guess that's sort of like an expectation grid. We have them to do what we call an argument boundaries.
Yeah.
Guidelines for how an argument. So what's acceptable, what's unacceptable, and usually under the unacceptable, people would put cursing,
Yeah.
et cetera,
And
screaming,
fighting or hitting,
yelling,
pushing.
hitting.
Yeah.
You know, some people even say leaving the room.
Yeah.
You know, and you know that one we kind of get people to negotiate some.
Yes.
But Kimberly, you're right. Any kind of abuse is non-negotiable.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not negotiable.
Yes.
Yeah, even emotional abuse.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh,
any
yeah.
form of abuse.
It's
Yes.
non-negotiable.
Yeah. And so you want to keep, you know, once people put that up front, and like we have with the argument boundaries, then it's sort of unknown in the relationship. And then what do we see? We're talking about expectations. We're trying to say, let's put those expectations out there so people know
Right.
that and
Upfront.
up front.
So no cursing or name calling.
That's
Yeah,
good.
that becomes in. We do discuss that, and so then that's understood. And I even tell couples, you know, if need be, you know, write them down, put them up somewhere, and then when there's an infringement, and then go back and say, this is what we agreed on
Right.
before we got married, and we want to follow these guidelines.
But we sort of suggest that within the mission statement.
I was just about to bring
Okay.
that up when you mentioned mission statement. We've, over the years, done a mission statement with our family, with our kids, and it's our roadmap. And
It really is.
if someone is straying off that, you like you said, bring it back. Okay, wait a minute, you're straying.
This is what we said.
That's right. So, and it's good to have a mission statement because it keeps you focused and the family on the path that you have discussed that you want to follow. You know. So yes.
So, for example, again, if someone in their mission statement said something about loving communication, and I'm just saying, suppose that was there, but then how does this fit in with loving communication? As we said, this was our mission.
Right.
So you're right, it's a
Yes.
guideline, it's a goal.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
What about believing your spouse is responsible for your happiness? Now that's an unrealistic expectation.
That's unrealistic.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
it is.
because you know sometimes we feel like our spouse is supposed to be all to us versus God, but you know to make us happy in every area or aspect of our life.
Yeah, that's unrealistic. Number one, no one person can make you happy. We're
Right.
talking about God.
Yeah.
And then happiness is really a choice sometimes. I mean, you know, happiness is really a choice.
And it's fleeting.
Sometimes you have to, in the situation, you just have to choose to accept God's inner peace and joy.
Have to.
Yes.
And move on.
How do we even qualify happiness?
And what is happiness?
And what is happiness? I don't know that we know what a person's happiness, you know, quote is. Do they
That's
know
true.
what that means?
But how can you put that expectation on an imperfect person?
Yeah.
That's striving to be more like Christ.
Yeah.
But to put that entire weight or
Yeah.
responsibility
Yeah.
on your spouse to try to make you completely happy in every aspect, that's unrealistic.
No
But
one
you know,
person can make you happy.
People said, I got into this marriage so that I could be happy and you would make me happy. They will say this. And I said, no, I don't know how that person will know what your happiness is.
Yeah, what will make you happy?
Yeah.
And we're
And so
fickle.
people think what will
Yes.
make them happy is if you do everything I tell you to do.
Yes, yes.
And we're fickle people, you know.
Yeah, because you said it's emotions and happiness can be fleeting.
It's fleeting, yeah,
sometimes, you know.
yeah. I mean, because your
emotions
spouse could
change.
say, "You would make me happy if you took me to Disney World." I take you to Disney World, but the lines are 2 hours long. Now you're upset. I mean, you know,
Exactly.
I did what you asked to make you happy, but now you're upset because we got to wait 2 hours to get on the Magic Kingdom ride. You know, so that is that
Yeah.
inner, you know, emotions.
Well,
and
I
roller
often
coasters.
qualify this happiness idea in my class, my ethics class. I often say, okay, let me tell you what happiness is to me. Happiness is you baking me a German chocolate cake and goose track ice cream is what I have for happiness. And my class invariably would say, I don't even like chocolate. And you say, and I had students in my class would say, no, It is a key lime pie. It is this. And so we have different ideas about what constitute happiness to us. So how do we then make that person happy if we have different concept of what happiness is? How do we know what their happiness quotient is?
And Rose says that your spouse is not responsible for all your happiness, but there's a certain amount of happiness that comes from a healthy, loving relationship.
It is.
That's a good statement, Rose, and I do believe that.
Yeah, I
too.
think that's absolutely true.
It is.
But that a healthy, loving relationship is not one based on one spouse doing everything to make the other spouse happy all the time. You know, it's based on mutual love and respect.
Mutual. That's the key word, mutual.
Yeah, I don't
What
know, Janet.
about your marriage will always be the same? We know that marriages go through seasons. You all did a presentation on
that.
seasons.
Seasons, yeah.
And but sometimes spouses have this unrealistic belief, expectation that their marriage is just going to stay in that season.
And there's no way you can stay. But aging, maturing, all of those things change that so that you can't really say, and the person, the couple may be at different stages even within that. You know, so I don't know how, when you talk about those stages, when you think about stages or areas of change and transition, education, life, health issues, all of those things impact that area. How do you do that? How do you try to work that out? And that's where it's difficult.
Yeah, I was going to say that thinking about the seasons, you know, when you first get married, it's just the two of you, and you're so madly in love, or even stages or seasons, whichever you want to look at. It's a totally different experience than you have children, you know. And so what the research shows is marital happiness goes down once they're children.
Wow.
And it's
And
kind
it goes
of
down more with teenagers.
It goes down again when you have teenagers. But I'll tell you what, as you all know, no offense to anyone in this room,
All right.
once they leave the home, marital happiness goes up.
Oh,
Oh, we kind of know that already a little bit, don't we?
well, yeah, we're working on it. Working on it.
But we know that in marriages there's a stability phase and sometimes there's instability phase. And we're saying seasons. That's just how it is. And definitely, like I mentioned earlier, if you're both in school, the kids are doing different things, you go through a phase where sometimes, you know, you're down, you're up, but know that this too shall pass. And you'll go to a better season. So yes.
Well, you know, I think we lightly touched on the mother-in-law thing. Did we get deep enough into that? In terms of those expectations, like who wins? Does my background win over your background? Does it lose over your background? Because I think that was like a point of contention in our marriage, because like she had younger sisters, and you know, she felt like her younger sisters were just as important as the children, because they were children to her, and that was something from her background, you know. So hopefully I'm going back to where I saw a question about that, but how do we deal with that when I feel like what my parents did, my household should be just as strong as my current household? Like how do we deal with that?
Well, I think you're right. That's a challenge. And so I think one of the things that in the negotiation, you have to sort of look at what works for us. Let's just start off with.
But what if mama did it? You know?
But that worked for mama. It might not work for us.
Yeah.
You know, this has sort of been in the back of my mind. I don't know if this is a G-rated story, but you know, my mother told me before I got married, and my husband's heard me say this before. She said, you know, every time your husband wants sex, don't give it to him. Just sometimes don't give him sex. So I thought, this is my mother. This is good advice. Sometimes my husband would want it. I would want it, but mother said sometimes say no.
Whoa.
And I was like, I don't know how long I was married. Because I was married like 7 or 8 years before. I was like, wait, if my mom wants to do that, Mama can do that.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that.
Wow.
You see what I'm saying? So
Right.
she said,
Yeah.
that way it'll make him want it, but whatever. She had a theory. So everything your mama tells you,
Yeah.
you shouldn't keep.
I don't know
The
if
other
that theory
thing
was proven.
You have to filter that out.
The
Yeah.
other thing that many women, especially African American women here in their family, is every woman needs to keep a little something for herself.
Yes.
Yes.
That she,
Hidden
is that
away.
true? Hidden away. Don't let them know what you got, girl. 'Cause
Yes.
You don't know what. See, again, everything we hear, we don't need to keep.
Wow.
The
Yes.
Bible says, when I was a child, I
was
thought like a child, I
Yes.
spake like a child, but when I became an adult, I put the childish things away.
Yes.
And so I think there are some things we need to put away.
But what I'm saying is filtering. You have
Yep.
to filter it out. Knowing what generation, what experience, what cultural context that we find ourselves in. All of that has to be filtered through this, and then the spiritual. What is a spiritual thing here? What is the value of what they're saying?
Correct.
And evaluate it and say, why do we say that? Why do we
Yeah.
assume?
Do we need to keep
is
that?
right? Yeah.
It's just like none of us are riding around in Model T cars. Well, the people who do, they have a lot of money.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But they don't. It's not their full-time car.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so that's because we want a car that has this. And so we discard cars when they get older. And so there are ideas and that we do need to discard that really are not pertinent for this marriage.
And what you said about my mom told me this, and then it's almost like when we begin to understand why our spouse is doing something that's counterintuitive or something, it helps us to be able to deal with it as well. Because your husband could have been like, man, that's some rejection. Now I'm feeling this and feeling that. But little did he know,
Yeah.
I was just
his
trying to
mother-in-law,
Where it
I'm
came
just
from.
trying to obey my mama.
the wise old owl,
She's in your ear saying, not tonight.
Not tonight.
Yeah.
It's like, who's sleeping in your bed? Yeah.
Wow. So that goes even with the communication piece. Like, you know what? I'm withholding because this is what mom said one time.
Exactly. Don't let him know everything you're feeling. Or don't let her know everything. If she thinks you do, you can't really cry. If she thinks you're
That's
going to
true.
be this, you're going to be. And so we come in with. Not only do we come in expectations from our parents, but from society.
That's true.
Yes.
And then we have to see the filters, as Trevor talked about, should be spiritual, godly, etc., but also what's best for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you may have to do that. Somebody was talking about this issue of that separate account.
Ooh.
Oh, I still keep the separate account.
Yes,
Yeah,
I
that
still
was
hear to
Kimberly.
keep a
Yeah,
separate
she said
account.
she's still here
Here
to keep
is
a
it.
separate
Yeah,
account.
but someone asked something earlier about instability, and I'd like to go back to that if you can find it, because it said something about a loss of a job and those kind of things and how they might impact us.
Yeah.
So even if we don't see it, those are some things that can lead to instability in a relationship. And so I just think the biggest thing is relationships are not static,
Yes.
Yeah.
That's true.
and that you have to be prepared to work together. So, Nicole talked about when she quit her job, and I remember when I said, I'm going to retire. And my husband said, well, then you make a decision that you think you want to do, and then it becomes our decision. Then we discuss it. Can we afford it? Can we not afford it? I want to stay home. Again, going back to that earlier thing.
Yes.
Can we afford it? Can we not afford it? Because see, it's a team.
Right.
I want to do it. I don't care if we can afford it or not. No, that I think a woman should stay home. Well, yeah, she should, but if you can't afford it,
Right.
That's right.
You need
then
to
what
work.
might we do? You might, I remember I had a niece who was in the medical area, and she worked weekends so that her husband could be. She was home with the kids all week. And then on the weekend, the husband had them.
Wow.
That's what they worked out.
Yeah.
Now, I personally wouldn't want to do it that way.
Yeah.
I worked part-time for a while. So there are all kinds of ways that you can do things, but you have to do what? Talk.
You have to talk.
Yes, and I have a quick story to share too. A college friend of mine, we were all married, and she found out she was pregnant with her first child. but she was the one that carried the insurance, and her husband had his own barbershop. And so she says, well, I'm not going back to work. And so I was like, oh, really? I was like, well, did y'all talk about it? She's like, no, I'm just not going to go back. I want to stay at home. So the next conversation, they talked about it, and she said, well, I really was not. I was just quick to say what I wanted to do, but I didn't think about the ramifications that, you know, the insurance aspect and, you know, our finances. And so, but I told her that was, you know, awesome that she talked about it with her spouse, and they came to that conclusion, you know. So, and communication, as we've been saying, is a major piece to that.
You have to talk about it and keep talking about it.
And Alicia says cultural differences can be so contentious, but understanding and respecting the differences and use them to aid the relationship, not destroy it.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
They bring
Alicia.
something to the relationship, the differences.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think patience is the key. You know, just for me in our marriage, like the time when Nicole did decide to leave her job. I mean, I was behind her 110%. I'm like, babe, God's got us. Let's do it. But here's what happened. Year one, I'm like, champion, girl, God still has us. You know, I'm like, then year two, I'm like, God still has us. I'm like, we were going into year three, y'all, and I'm like, I mean, you know, because now she had gotten really, really comfortable. I mean,
I think I can enjoy this, you know?
I was like, did I do too good of a job? I mean, what, you know?
I'm supportive of you for 1 year, maybe 2, but now you're in the 3rd year.
And I got to be transparent. You know, I started getting jealous. I'm like, I want to be, you know.
Still up under the covers.
Yes, and she would be like, baby, don't get sick. We need you to keep doing what you do. Yeah, so, you know, I think I did a good job, did I, baby, in building you up? Because you were.
He did a good job. But it was funny because the kids, when I did get a job, the kids was like, you took 3 years off. You know that. And they said, in taking 3 years off, Mom, you ended up cutting stuff that we wanted to do. You know, I was like, listen to this. You know, just work, Mama. But this has really been a great conversation. Awesome. Talking about roles and expectations. And so just in summarizing, preparing to close out, what you all have stated is that communication is important.
Absolutely.
And that what works for your household works for your household. And that we shouldn't carry things from our home that we did or we were taught in our home into our marriages, unless it's something that we can. It's a good aspect. So
unless it fits our relationship.
It fits our relationship.
Yeah.
So what works, bring it, and what doesn't work, don't.
Correct.
And then also to know that your spouse can't please you in all ways, make you happy.
It's not their role.
That's right. It's God.
And so as we begin to land this plane, we'll throw it back to our senior stateswoman and state man. What are some nuggets that you guys wouldn't mind dropping to our audience as we sort of end it, you know?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we talked enough about roles.
We
I think
did.
We
needed more time on
Let's
it.
go.
But
We got
so
6 minutes.
I think that we have to be careful not to have gendered expectations for our roles.
Yeah.
So I remember a couple we worked with, and she would cut the lawn, and he would get so upset. People see you cutting the lawn. She liked cutting the lawn.
She
If
wants
she
to be
wants to
outside.
cut the lawn and be outside,
Yeah.
what is we should not have gendered roles. And if if you want to do all the cooking and he doesn't want to do the cooking, then fine. I mean, I for one love cooking.
Yeah.
And so, but I don't mind if my husband does cooking, but I do love cooking. But I'm not going to cut the lawn, not because
That's
of
understood.
gender.
Yeah.
I
She
just-
doesn't go in the garden
just
either.
not something you
They're not the
do.
garden lady.
No, I'm not. No, our church has a garden, and I told our pastor Wade, I said, I'll be like the little red hens friends. Remember the little red hens? She said, who will help me plant? Nobody. Who will help me do? Only time they raised their hand was when eating.
Time to eat.
Yeah, it's time to eat. Yeah, harvest
Yes,
time.
And I think what I think is important in this discussion is that we are in this thing together, and we're sharing roles. And we're sharing roles when it comes that we have to do something. We need to be prepared to flip sometimes in order for this family to go forward and for this thing to work, marriage to work.
Mm-hmm.
But we may have to do something else. We don't know when the other person will get sick. We
That's
don't
right.
know when
Correct.
the other person is
Correct.
going to have something
have to
that's going to. Yeah, you have
to pivot.
You
Absolutely.
really have to.
Absolutely. Because you're a team.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So the roles are less important than making sure this family moves forward. This is my husband's word. He's
Yeah.
always said, this family must go forward.
Yeah.
And so how will the family go forward?
Yeah.
What do we need to do to make sure this family
And
goes
I
forward?
see that as us being so committed to each other that we're going to work together, and we're not going to worry about it. People come to our house and say, "You will work like a team in the kitchen."
Yes.
Well, we have been doing it for a little while, and you know, you don't even think that you're doing something spectacular. You're just doing something
That's right.
because it works best for
Works
us.
best for you.
You know,
Work
and
together as a
that's what
team.
it is. It goes back to our grandson's text. You know, working together as a team.
And
Teamwork.
then also to make sure to, if you're single or if you're in a relationship, discuss expectations
Yes.
that you may have
Yes.
with the person that you're with or possibly wanting to marry. There's nothing wrong with discussing
Absolutely.
some expectations.
But just let's be transparent about that. Many of us don't know what our expectations
That's true.
are.
Yeah.
That's true.
And
We
so
grow into it.
We're in the relationship, and then we realize, oh, I expect them to do A, B, C. You're like, you didn't do this. Well, why should I do this?
Yeah.
Because I expected. Ah.
Yes. Yes.
Well, why did you expect it? Well, you know, my dad was always okay. So this is where this is coming from. And you know, as you know, my husband has said, I'm not your dad, and I've said, I'm not your mom.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, guys, we thank you for joining us, and like Ryan Smith said, from the best.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, Doctors Edith and Trevor Frazier, Dr. Trevor and Edith Frazier, great people we've known for years. And they have poured into us, guys. And that is honestly, they've poured into us. And we thank you for joining us. And yes, Stacy, you may have to go back and see it and just get those nuggets because it is there. It is there. And guys, remember, this is, go ahead.
Al said, teamwork.
Makes the dream
Makes
work.
the dream work.
That's right. That's right.
Yes. So, Sister Taylor, do you have something?
Yeah, well, stay tuned next for November, the third Sabbath. We will be back with Committed and Covered, another awesome, great topic. So make sure that you guys tune in. And again, we thank the Fraziers, Doctors Fraziers, for attending. One of our favorite couples.
Yes.
We've been with them for years and years and learned many things from them.
And
so-
guys, I'm sorry to cut you off. Remember, share this with someone. If you felt like you've heard something in the chat, or I mean, not just the chat, but as we talked, that enriched you, helped you with your marriage, helped you even for yourself, share this with someone and say, hey, I need you to go back and look at All Things Marriage and Family Talks, because they had some people on there that had some pretty good stuff about expectations and roles. So we want you to remember that. Share it with someone. And again, like Sister Taylor said, join us on the third Sabbath of November.
Thank you for joining us.
And we'll see you again. And we love you. Bye.
Bye.